the CEO of SE for All, Damilola Ogunbiyi, joined us to tell us all about the focus areas of the forum and what it means to hold the international event in Africa.
This is the first time Sustainable Energy for All is having a forum in Africa. And in this context, in this world of energy transition, we really have to understand that there are some people who don't have energy. We still have about 759 million people who have no access to electricity, so unfortunately you won't be watching this show. But there's also another 2.6 billion people who have no access to clean cooking. So while we're talking about the energy transition, we have to understand that the energy access story is firmly part of the transition. And we have to learn from the mistakes that we've made in some of the developed world and make sure that for these people to be connected, it's done with clean, effective resources. So it's important that we really consider the just and equitable energy transition, knowing that from the developing world, especially Africa and Asia, it's going to be completely different for how the West transitions.
That you mentioned, the just and equitable format of doing these things. So how does climate justice figure in the forum here today and the upcoming discussions that will happen? How is that going to drive the way commitments will be made here?
You see, we've moved from, just having a discussion about energy access to having a true discussion about what does it mean for energy transition. So we're going to have an African ministerial and an Asian ministerial, but particularly in the African ministerial, what do you need to do to transition, right? So with African countries, it's not necessarily about them being high emitters, because they're not. It's about them having low energy needs. For them to get to their energy needs, how does that transition actually work? That's the conversation we should be having. How do these countries industrialize? What is the economic growth story? And feed it all into our climate goals, instead of the other way around, where we talk about our climate goals and we disconnect from the energy sector, which is responsible for 2/3 of greenhouse emissions. It's really, really important, because that's where the just and equitable really, really comes from, right? And if you talk about climate justice and you don't talk about energy transition being equitable, there's a complete disconnect. And we just want to bring the climate folks, the energy folks, the finance folks, the development folks all together and say, you can't do these things in isolation, right? Because at the end of the day, it's the people that suffer.
Absolutely. Working in silos has so far not worked out for anyone. So taking up a new, more comprehensive approach, I understand that. How would you say, the fact that you've brought this forum here to Africa, firstly, what drove that? And how would you say what is going to be the outcome of bringing this forum here and giving Africa a much louder voice at this forum this time?
As an African, obviously, I've always wished to have some type of global event on the continent. I was fortunate enough that even my predecessor was already looking at Kigali, so I can't take all the credit. But when I came here, I think it was just before COVID, the energy, and I just felt like this is the place to bring people to. Because a lot of people who work on the continent, work on issues on the continent and in Asia, have never visited. So they don't understand the unique nuances that there are when you come into continent, that there is, an educated workforce that can actually develop these projects for you. There is a thriving private sector, there are local financial markets, and that's what I wanted to bring into the conversation. We have about 10 ministers coming all around Africa. We have different Africans coming, but we have Asia coming, we have South America coming, it's a real global South force to meet, also all our colleagues in the global North. And it's just such an important kind of beautiful moment to say, okay, fine, this is now serious, guys. We've got 8 years to go. We can't keep doing all these small projects in all these places. We need to raise ambition, and with ambition, it has to also be raising financial ambition. I feel like this is one of the key moments before COP as well.
Yeah.
And in COP, we do hear that we sometimes don't hear the voice of the developing countries. Absolutely. So it was very, very important that climate justice and energy transition really be at the heart of this conference.
You mentioned COP. It is essentially the biggest climate action conference we have in the world. But SE for All is also essentially about climate action in a more focused way. So what from COP26 do you think you would like to learn from when approaching the next 3 days here at SE for All?
think the most important thing that we took out of COP26 going into COP27 is that we need to listen to governments and we need to develop tools for that local community. So I'll give an example. My country, Nigeria, we developed an energy transition plan for them. So for the first time, Nigeria could see what is the pathway and what we need to do between now and 2060. So we knew 2050 wasn't possible, but 2060 was. I was one of the people shocked when the president of Nigeria, the largest oil and gas nation in Africa, came up and said, yes, we will commit to net zero by 2060. But it's going to cost us 410 billion above business as usual spending, and the whole transition will cost 1.9 trillion. You know, so now we're going to the next COP. Where is some of that money coming from? Where are those projects, and helping them actually develop projects? You know, all this stuff is pointless if there's no action on ground. If people are not getting connected, and you know, I think people also misread what our transition is. So in SSA, apart from South Africa, the transition isn't big plants. The transition is much more dangerous than that. It's diesel and petrol gensets, of which we have easily over 100 million of those. And you can't police that. You can't get rid of that. You can't unless you find an immediate clean solution. So, you know, and if you aggregate that, that is just as harmful as some of the coal-fired power plants. So it's still a risk, you know, while populations still have to grow. I say with my country, they say, oh, there's 5 gigawatts on grid. I say, yeah, but it's a 50 gigawatt community, because most of that stuff is serviced by decentralized, very, very dirty fuels. So those are kind of like the hard-hitting topics as well. Like, let us just be truthful. Let us know how much money is out there. And, you know, private sector that wants to come in, tell us what is needed. And we also talk to the government, say, what policies you have to put in place. But it has to go side by side. It's not, we've done all the policy, because you're never going to have enough policies, right? And then the money doesn't come. Then you lose faith in governments. And that's been happening a lot over the years. And that's what we hope as a neutral broker. We can just show the data. We can just show the facts. That this is what you have to do. This is how much you have to spend on renewables. This is how you have to go straight to EV somehow. This is what you have to do off-grid. We're just basing everything on facts. And I'm such a strong believer in data. You know, data-driven decision-making has, you know, channeled my entire career. And we're hoping to infuse a lot more in all this country-specific work.